Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Mental Roots. I am Nathan Ade. If you're new to the podcast, welcome, thanks for joining us. I've been doing this for nearly a year and a half already. Time flies. It's been a Mazzolini during COVID. If you don't understand what that term means, I apologize for my colloquialism, but I am just feeling so loose, so free, so happy right now, because if you are familiar with what Mental Roots is about, you will know that there's not just the Mental Roots podcast, there is a visual component to the whole Mental Roots brand and movement. And I am an animator, for those of you who don't know. First and foremost, Mental Roots was originally a short animated film which has just been released, so that's the big announcement I want to make right now. It's just been released. Sunday the 12th of December was the premiere date, and it premiered in a program called Animated Shorts, BBC Introducing Arts. It aired at 10:30 p.m. and you can go and watch it now on BBC iPlayer. There's going to be a link to that in the written description for this episode, wherever you are watching or listening. And there is also a link to watch the film by itself as well through my website. So I've got the embed link from for the film from the BBC New Creatives website, and I've embedded it into my own personal website. So there's a link to my personal website where there's some paragraphs I've written about the film and why it exists. And then of course there's a link to all the social media there as well, and the podcast. So yeah, all of that is to say, Mental Roots, for those of you who don't know, this is a whole media project movement with a podcast side and a visual side, and I'm going to have a series of Mental Roots animations coming out which will be informed and influenced by the interviews we have here on the Mental Roots podcast. But what is it all about? Black mental health is what it's all about. It started particularly focusing on black men's mental health, and it is focused on men's mental health mainly, but branching out from black men's mental health and looking broader at the black community, so looking at black women as well, and yeah, just really to destigmatize the conversation around mental health in the black community. And up until now, all of my guests have been black. We've gone through a whole season. We're like 30, just over 30 episodes deep now or something. And today we have our first white guest. We have our first Caucasian guest, a Caucasian male who is also gay, but I came across this guy through a Clubhouse chat that I've been involved with for a few months now. So to all the members of the Mendable group who are listening, hello to you. I send you greetings. Mendable is basically, again, a social media collective that was created through Clubhouse, I believe, but they're creating an app to give all men mental health support. And so I've been involved in their Clubhouse rooms for a few months now. And Patrick, who is our guest today, Patrick Hill, currently based in London, I believe. He's one of the admins for that group and helping to put this app together. And so that's how I came across him. And here is my conversation with him. He is a coach, a mindset coach, a health and well-being coach as well. And the stuff he shared with me in this conversation was incredible. It goes to show that, and the reason why I decided, not that I have to really justify this, but the reason why I've invited him as a white man to come on here isn't necessarily because he's white, but because just the things he has to say in regards to mental health, I'm sure will benefit our predominantly black audience, and just anyone, regardless of ethnicity or gender, who is listening or watching, because he talks about, alcohol abuse. He talks about coming from, as a gay man, navigating sexuality and navigating feeling like an outcast, coming from a strict religious family, and how he's always had this striving for identity, like, who am I? And obviously identity has been a strong theme throughout this whole podcast. So I know obviously this podcast is focused on black men, but he as a man, there's still a lot of transferable things that will apply to black men as well. Many black men, and especially gay black men who may be listening to this. So anyway, as usual, I'm keeping the intro way too long, so we're going to get straight into it. This is part 1 of my chat with Patrick. Just a little trigger warning, there is a little bit of strong language here and there, but again, you know, you're a mature audience, a lot of you, so just pop your headphones in. If you've got kids or family around, then you'll be fine. But yeah, and some of the issues that he mentions might be triggering, and so if you do find yourself triggered in any way, then there you can contact Patrick's social media details, and contact details are in the written description for this podcast episode. So if you do find yourself in a vulnerable emotional state, hearing some of the things he talks about, please contact him. This is what he does. He is here for you. And yeah, let's get into it. There we go. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Mental Roots podcast. So I'm here with a really nice guy, very genuine, Patrick Hill. Usually
That's
Patrick.
A kind start.
Yeah, nah, it's all right, man. Usually with my guests, I allow them to introduce themselves, just to say who they are, what they do, and I'll just give a little background context in how we met, or I'll let you tell that story if that's all right.
Sure. I like that you introduced me as a nice guy.
Yeah.
I don't get called that often. Yeah, so I'm Patrick. I live in London. I've been in the UK now for nearly 19 years. Wow. Came for 1 year. 19 years later, here I am. I'm a business and personal coach.
Are you Australian or from New Zealand?
Oh, gee, that's so offensive, isn't it? They just can't tell you.
Did I? Or is my guess way off?
No, not at all. Actually, my mum was Australian. My dad's a Kiwi, so I'm a bit of a mongrel. So you're safe, Nathan. I'm both.
Cool.
Both. Yeah. So I came to the UK when I was 28, and I'm 47 soon. Yeah, so this is home, and I love it here, and I love my life here and what I've created and the work that I do. Very passionate about working with others and helping them improve their lives in whatever way is most beneficial to them. Yeah.
And just to provide some context on how we met, so I've been on Clubhouse for a bit of a while now, and I think it's the Mendable group, isn't it, on Clubhouse? So there's
the Monday, Thursday nights, 8 p.m. UK.
Yeah. So straight away to any man who's listening right now, I'd thoroughly recommend joining our Monday and Thursday evening kind of Clubhouse room. It's dedicated to men. It's a men's mental health room, but of course women are welcome in there as well to contribute and be part of the conversation. And we'll talk a bit more about that in our conversation. But that's kind of how I met you. I think you're one of the admins of the group, and
And I remember the first time. I remember the first time I heard you speak in that room, Nathan, and what struck me was how, firstly, you being such a young male and having the kind of the foresight and this emotional and mental wealth and health about you. And it really struck me because I work with a lot of people, and particularly young males, young black males who struggle. And when I heard your voice, it's like, oh, this is a leader. That's what I heard.
Wow.
And that you're a young black male with that sort of leadership skills, and how you are with yourself. It was just really inspirational to hear.
That's amazing to hear, man. And yeah, that's something I've always liked about you as well, is that you've been very, not just you, but some of the other regular attendees of the room have been very encouraging to me, you know, to keep going. And it's felt like a safe space for me as well, just to share how I'm doing, you know, especially finishing uni and just talking through how I'm feeling and different things. So already, you know, I feel like, you know, it's a family. And there's a few other people in the room that I've expressed an interest to also come on the podcast as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. I like for instance, Joshua. Joshua.
Yeah.
He's also expressed an interest to be on the podcast, and I think his story would be amazing as well, in terms of how he's navigated manhood and mental health and all of that stuff. But today we're
Mm-hmm.
here to hear from you, and just to provide some context to the podcast. So, as you already know, it is focused on young black men and mental health. So,
Mm.
up until now,
Which
a
is
lot of
why
my
you invited that's why you invited an older white gay male, right? Because I
yeah,
tick all of those boxes.
yeah, just to mix up to tick the diversity box, I guess. Um,
Oh, thanks. I love being a token tick.
yeah, he's very helpful for the look of the podcast. So thank you for being our token white guy.
Yeah. No, you gotta tick the white gay male box, right? Oh,
Everything
Nathan.
different from what I've already had. No, but seriously, I think one thing I've realized about this podcast is that when we look at the black community, um, there are obviously many layers to the things that impact our mental health. Not just kind of the cultural stuff that we deal with in Western society, and I guess the legacy of racism or whatnot, but also just looking at traditions within various kinds of black families, in African families and
Mhm.
Caribbean families, the beliefs we have and how that influences the way we process our own emotions. And I'm hoping to have more guests as well who can talk about more practical elements of mental health, such as nutrition, exercise, all these basic things that can
Mhm.
be easily overlooked as well. Looking at the cultural impacts is solid, but there's also a very practical element to how we can improve our mental health. And in
Yeah.
having more of these diverse conversations, I'm finding more value in speaking to different kinds of people.
Mm.
I feel like sometimes to have a good picture of yourself, you need to be able to see it from other people's point of view. And I've started interviewing young black females as well to get their perspective on mental
Yeah.
health, and also how they've related with black men who have had their own struggles. And now, I guess we're branching out even more, looking at the crossover between all men, because you're a man as well, but also bringing sexuality into it. And I believe in one of our messages, you also said that you might have a few things to say about mental health in black men. I don't know if you've
Mm.
encountered black men
Yeah.
with mental health issues. So it'd be great to have your
Mm.
perspective,
Mm.
especially as a white male. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Sure.
why we're doing this conversation.
Yeah. And one of the things I want to put this out there right now. One of the things that I used to shy away from, definitely, um, was I used to shy away from. I used to feel like I didn't have anything to contribute to
Mm,
the Black, Asian, my ethnic origin groups. I
yeah.
really felt that because I'm a white male. I nearly said I'm a white straight male. That would be funny. But one of the things that I now know from the work I do is there are so many universal themes. There are so many points of connection
Mm,
across the board for all of us when it comes to mental health. And then we have layers. We have different layers. Every individual, regardless of where they were born or color of their skin or whatever, we all have layers on top of that. And I think it's really important for us to start exploring and talking about other people's layers so that we realize that actually every single one of us has other things on top of, whether you're white, black, Asian, any ethnic group has their own cultural things. And one of the things I said to you earlier in the chat was I was raised into a very, very Catholic family, almost right wing. And that was one of my layers. And that really impacted on my mental health and well-being as a young boy growing
mm,
up into manhood. So I think there can be this thing where, because we aren't having enough of these sorts of conversations, we can make assumptions that someone else had it easier because of X, Y, and Z. And that's never the case. I think it's
yeah.
all different. And obviously we know that white people generally grow up with an advantage because of luck. However, they will also have layers. And I met this Polish guy recently who was explaining the impact of his culture. Now, he's white, Polish. He's an immigrant like me. I'm an immigrant here to the UK. But the layers that he experienced and impacted on his mental health because he was Polish, totally different to mine, but significant.
Interesting. Yeah, and even like just on a nationality level, of course, there's those differences. I imagine he was also white as well?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, even just within the same race and the same gender, as you said, so many other factors can come into play. So, yeah, I mean, you've already started talking about your life. I guess that was kind of the first main topic. But before we delve deeper into your story, how would you define the term mental health? This is something I've started asking more of my guests because I feel like as much as there has been a lot of progress in the recent years, especially during COVID, in awareness on mental health and the resources out there, I still feel like there's still a bit of a stigma about it. And I still hear people use the term mental health to describe mental health illnesses rather than
Right.
just using it as a term to describe generally how you're
Yeah.
doing. So I guess what
Yeah.
would be your working definition of the term mental
Well,
health?
the first thing I want to say is that when we use the phrase mental health, I think it's important that we use it. However, my kind of vision for where we get to is actually when we use the word health, it encompasses that and all other aspects of health. But at the point where we are in history, we are still very much talking about mental health as almost a separate thing when it's not, because everything's interconnected and interrelated, as we know. But for me, when I think about my mental health, there's when I'm really, really, mentally and psychologically well, there's a harmony and a peace internally. There's this sense of real self-worth and healthy esteem where I can come here and talk to you and feel at peace and at ease in who I am and how I am with you. There's not an obsessive thought process going on and on and on as I've had in the past. There's a freedom and an ease, I think, for me. And I think back to times in my life when I was very unwell with anxiety or depression. There was no peace and there was no ease. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. And yeah, so let's again talk about your childhood. You said you grew up in a Catholic setting. I guess, yeah, just talk about how you navigated identity growing up and
Yeah,
how
well,
your mental health awareness started to come into play as you grew up.
yeah. I mean, and I've talked about this quite a lot over the years with different people, but I didn't know, Nathan, I didn't know that I had anxiety and depression until I was 38. Right? I didn't know. Because when you grow up, I grew up in a very, very Catholic family, as I've said. My father was an alcoholic. So there was always this edge of fear or what's going to happen next. And when you grow up in a household where there is that sort of level of uncertainty, whether it's because of alcoholism or addiction or domestic violence or, historical trauma things, the brain is constantly on edge like a blackbird in the garden. The hypervigilance that you grow up with as an anxious kid. So, alcoholism was another one of my layers that I referred to earlier, along with Catholicism, along with, growing up as a gay kid. It was tough. It was really tough. I grew up on the outside of my own family because to be a gay male and try and be Catholic, well, the messages I received from religion, society, and my family was that's wrong and it's evil and you're going to go to hell, but before that you're going to die from AIDS.
Wow.
That's what I grew up.
Yeah, and just
I grew up
just
in
to
that sort
just
of
to
thinking.
interject quickly, sorry.
Yeah.
You might have known already that I'm a Christian, but although I wouldn't necessarily associate myself or limit myself to a particular denomination necessarily. I just, the way I
Mm,
see it, I just believe the Bible and
mm,
authentically follow Jesus. But it is, I this could be a whole other topic in itself in terms of navigating faith and sexuality. But I just
mm,
want to say, like, just as a genuine follower who really tries to model the precepts of Jesus, I don't
mm,
see the the I don't see the Christ-like character in condemning people to hell because of their sexuality. I think
right.
it is a very nuanced conversation, and of course, the Bible does, clarify, what sin is. But it's when I look deep into it, it's not. I think it's very damaging when Christians make it seem like homosexuality is the worst of sins when it's really not the case. There's no biblical evidence for that, and that's more
Mm,
to do with just the damage of um I guess westernized Christianity, and when you bring all sorts of other elements into it, like you know
mm.
um our hegemonic society, and um yeah, just the corruption of humans. I think that's when Christianity unfortunately starts to have a bad reputation because of these
Yeah.
leaders who put so much emphasis on sexuality, but not on the fact that there are heterosexual sins, and that
Mm.
God sees all sin as just as bad. So, and the fact that your sin doesn't have to define you, that forgiveness is possible, and all of these other
Well,
reductive aspects.
society unfortunately has always marginalized
Mm,
vulnerable groups, always.
yeah, yeah. So I just want to
And
say, man, just to encourage you, like this, yeah, just as a Christian, like it angers me too, just so you know.
yeah,
Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Before we continue, I just want to share with you something very briefly, something that's really been helping me with my concentration and productivity with all the work I've been doing, finishing uni, finishing the first two Mental Roots short films, which I can't wait to share with you. All of that stuff, in addition to the podcast, needs some high level concentration and motivation, especially during a pandemic. So if you're a busy guy like me, you've got loads of things going on, and you want something that can boost your productivity, I highly recommend some natural caffeine energy shots that I've been using, which you can mix with tea or water or whatever you want. It's got a nice rich raspberry flavor, packed with vitamins and really good natural caffeine, which doesn't give you the crash and high calories like a lot of high caffeine drinks that are commercially sold. So if you want to order those shots for yourself and see how they can help you, then check out the link in the written description for this episode on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. And if you want to let me know personally how they help you when you do order them and try them for yourself, then message me at my personal Instagram page, which is at Nath_a day. So if you're watching on YouTube, it is right here on the screen. You can see it for yourself. But if you're just listening on a podcast platform, it is at NATH_ADDAI. Message me there to find out more about that product and any other products that I've been using, because I've been using other products as well as different workout techniques and things to help improve my physical health, which in turn improves my mental health. So thanks for listening. Let's get back into the episode. Enjoy.
well, here's another part of my story which links to this conversation that we've really boldly and bravely dived into really quickly. I was a young kid growing. I was one of 5 kids. I was the fourth. Wow. I say to my parents, they obviously saved the best for fourth, right? But so I'm growing up in this very small city Catholic family in New Zealand, and I can't turn to my mum and dad because I can't discuss anything sexuality related, with them. So what I do as a vulnerable young teenager at an all boys Catholic school, secondary school, I turn to the school guidance counselor, who's
and sorry, just for
context.
Yeah. Do you want to maybe explain a bit more on when you found out you were gay? Was it something that you always kind of sensed, or would you were
In
there a certain
hindsight,
stage in your life?
in hindsight, I can see it now. But
Mm,
when you're growing up as that, and you don't have any positive role models, or you don't have anything to see or look to, I didn't understand what was going on, Nathan.
mm,
How could I? I grew up in the 70s and 80s. There was nothing visible or healthy to have a reference to.
right.
Just as lots of young black males don't have, lots and lots of young black males don't have any healthy role models to look to go, oh, this is who I may be. Because identity isn't just a self thing.
Mm,
Identity is self in connection with others. I didn't have
yeah,
that,
yeah.
right?
That's a good
So
point. Yeah.
I'm growing up in this very Catholic family, small town. So I can't turn to my parents for support or discuss anything sexuality related. So I turned to the school guidance counselor initially when I was 13 at this all boys secondary school. And then he proceeded to groom me and abuse me.
Mm,
So let's not talk about sin
mm,
and Catholicism and Christianity, but let's talk about the point of layer upon layer upon layer is going to impact your mental health.
yeah.
And when you don't have a safe person or environment or people or community to turn to and connect to, what do you do?
Mm,
Well, I can tell you what I did and what I know billions of other people do. Turn to other things that
yeah.
will help them numb, run, and escape. And so what I did from a very young age is I turned to drink, drugs, and sex
Mm,
because I had no other skills or resources to help me cope.
mm. Yeah, man. That's, I think all of us can kind of relate to that. We all have these coping mechanisms that we use, and it's sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we don't realize their coping mechanisms. It's so ingrained in us that it's like, until someone gives you an outsider perspective, you think
Mm.
this is just normality. So, um, yeah, yeah, please like tell us. And by the way, thank you for your transparency, because um, talking about any kind of assault is, very can be very triggering. But
Mm.
it seems like you've had a lot of time to. I'm not to say that your healing process is finished, because I feel like that's a lifelong process.
Of course, it's a lifelong. But here's I know for a fact that in terms of the work that I've been able to do around that, I have been very blessed and very privileged in as much as I had the time, money, resources, and support around me when I was 38 to start doing that work. I wouldn't be able to sit here and talk to you peacefully and transparently about any of that if I hadn't done that work.
Mm,
And the whole point now is, Nathan, is like, and I say this a lot when I get to speak to people, is my stories are no longer for me. They're for you and others who are still navigating and needing to have support to hear the hardships and the struggles and the extreme pain. It was extreme pain.
mm,
That there is hope and that you too can get through it. But I know it takes work and it takes hard work. And for me, it took money. I was fortunate enough, I was earning enough money to pay for my own private therapy for 6 years, right?
mm,
Now, that was a huge commitment, but I think I was spending about £250 a month
wow.
extra just for therapy. But cigarettes, alcohol, drugs, owning a car, these are other
Mm.
choices that people make. I don't
And
smoke,
the
I don't
cost of
drink, I
those
don't do
things
drugs.
build up as well.
Right. So
Yeah.
how much is your mental health worth?
You know
What
what?
would you
That's the
put?
golden
What would you
question.
put? What would you put as a number in terms of money on your inner peace and internal wealth?
I'm gonna be very honest. That's a question I'm still asking myself, because obviously I've got my own stuff that I'm dealing with as well, and
Sure.
I'm still um I'm still open. I can see the value of counseling and therapy. Like I do want it, but at the same time, I guess all the um all the I guess not just excuses, but like the challenges of starting therapy when you haven't had the right therapist before. You know, things like
Mm,
finances,
mm,
time. Am I really ready? Is this really the answer? Is there still some more independent work I can do first to help myself?
mhm.
So these are questions I'm still grappling with. And so when you say how much is your mental health worth, that's the golden question, man. And I'm still trying to define that for myself. But it is very important for us to consider, because um, we always, the things that are most important to us, we do find some time or money for those things. So um, yeah, really
Well,
solid food for
the
thought.
the other question, the other question that I quite often ask clients that I work with is, have you had enough pain yet?
Mm. Enough
Have
pain
you
to
had enough
do
pain?
something.
Pain, unfortunately, becomes the ultimate motivator. But for
True.
some people, for
Yeah.
some people, their threshold for pain they think is higher than it actually is. And then what happens is they kill themselves. That's the reality of mental health. And I've had 3 suicides in my life, and I don't particularly care for them because they're horrific for everybody involved. But the reason I asked that question of have you had enough pain yet? It's like, it doesn't have to get worse. It doesn't.
Mm.
And here's an interesting thing linked to helping others and working with people. So as I said, I'm a business and personal coach, and I know I'm expensive, right? I am expensive, and I'm deliberately charging what I charge because I know I'm worth that. But even more importantly, I know that you are worth that and more. So clients will say, I can't afford that. And I say, oh, it's okay. How much did you spend on your last holiday?
Mm.
They've always spent more on their last week or 2-week holiday than doing a 3-month block of work with me that will change their lives. I've never, ever heard anyone who's been away on a week or 2-week holiday where they've come back and said, you know what? I feel so much more at peace with long-term lasting results. So it's all about, and that's why I deliberately say, how much is your mental health worth? How much are
Mm.
you worth? Because if we can spend 300 quid on a beautiful car a month and cigarettes and drugs and drink and so it's like, that's great, but it's all choices. What do you want? What's gonna impact your life in a positive way with long-lasting results?
Mm.
And I know for me, I can't answer for anyone else. It's like I spent over the 6 years about 25 grand on
Wow.
my therapy, and I'm telling you now, I don't believe I would be living the life I live. I could also be dead because my mental health was in such a bad way.
Mm. Wow. So yeah, let's keep going into your story. So growing up as a teenager, um, you feel that you are gay and you're trying to navigate, you've got all these coping
Mm.
mechanisms. I guess what level of pain did you reach, I guess, before you were desperate enough for a more long-term solution? Like how gradual is this kind of recovery
It
process?
was in term comparatively, and this sounds strange to say, but comparatively, I got off lightly. Okay, so I've been sober and in recovery for just over 22 years. I still have support to manage my mental health in terms of addiction recovery, but by the time I knew alcohol was a problem for me from the beginning. I knew that, right? That was a problem. I remember being 18 and drinking in such a way where it was only to achieve blackout and annihilation. And I knew it was a problem. And for me, obviously my father was an alcoholic, so I had that genetic predisposition to it, but how I drank was unhealthy from when I was 15, right? When the abuse started when I was 15, that was what I sought. That's what I did, because it gave me complete freedom from the internal psychological, emotional pain that was going on. I didn't know what to do.
Yeah. Sorry, 1 second. I'm just trying to find my other earbud. 1 sec.
No problem.
I just put it on. There it is. Found it. Okay, sorry about that. Carry on.
That's all right. So, yeah. So for me, it got really, really painful really quickly. And I don't want to go into graphic detail, but the listeners can use their imagination. So I would go from Wellington across to Sydney in Australia. It was only like a 3-hour flight, so it was easy to get to and fairly cheap. And I would go across there for a party week or 2 weeks and be off my head for the whole time. And this is what alcoholism and my addiction led me to, is I would become conscious with strangers in different parts of the city and say, who are you and what are you doing here? And they'd say, oh, this is my place. I had no control. And anyone who has a drink or drug problem or any other flavor of addiction, whether it's sex or gambling or whatever, will keep on engaging in the harmful behavior regardless of the negative consequences that come. And that's what I did. And when I was 24, I yet again did something very, very familiar that had happened repeatedly. And I came out of blackout with a stranger in a different place, and I didn't know where I was or what I'd been doing. And my soul broke. I just absolutely internally, I'm 24, 24. I don't look
Around
like
my age. Yeah.
Right, around your age, Nathan. And I was broken. My whole internal, mental, psychological health crumbled in that instant. And I left where I was, and I had to walk right across the city in Wellington, New Zealand. And if you know it, there's one set of hills on one side, and then about a 30-minute walk across the city, there's another set of hills. And I lived up by the university. It was 177 stairs up to where my flat was, up the top by the university. And it wasn't the walk of shame, it was a walk of hell, because I had just woken up for the first time because of extreme pain. And fortunately, that was the beginning. I guess that was actually the first bit of my journey of healing and recovery. But it took a very, very, very long time for me to get to a place of, okay, there's stuff in the past that I haven't even accepted and looked at. It took me 14 years of recovery to even accept and use the word abuse in relation to myself.
Like, as in you were abusing yourself, or?
No, the abuse.
Or you experienced abuse?
I'm referring to the abuse that had occurred when I was a teenager. Okay. I had just cut it off. I had never, ever allowed myself to use the word abuse around what had happened. So 23 years later, I'm 38. I'm sitting in my garden, just looking out here, and it was a hot summer, August 2013, and I was in a bad way. I was in a real bad way. And I just accepted that I had been abused. I'd reported it to the New Zealand police, historically, made the phone call from London to New Zealand, reporting that. And I'm sitting in my garden. It's a hot summer, August 2013, and there was a tree in my back garden. And I looked at that tree, and my thought was, I know that tree will take my weight. And then this other little voice goes, and there's a full bottle of vodka under the stairs. And then this other little voice goes, I think you're really tired, you should go to sleep. So I went to bed, and I woke up the next day, and I called my closest mate. His name's Patrick too. He came and saw me. He said, we've got to get you to your GP immediately. I was like, why? He goes, your eyes are dead. It's the most heartbreaking thing I have ever been told. And I knew what he meant, because I could feel that my eyes are quite blue. And when I'm really, really healthy and well, there's a light and a brightness and a spark. And at the moment, I'm really, really well. But because the emotional and psychological pain and the anxiety and the depression was right on me, I was as dark as I can get. The light goes in my eyes, and my eyes go this kind of almost cold blue-gray. And he said, "Your eyes are dead." It was the most horrific thing I've ever been told about me, because I felt it. I could feel it. And when he said that to me, I just burst into tears, because I knew I was very, very unwell. I don't use the words broken or having a breakdown, because what the hell does that mean anyway? I was seriously, seriously unwell. This man, this 38-year-old man, was just seriously unwell and didn't know what to do.
So that is the end of part 1 of my chat with Patrick. Powerful stuff. Obviously, we talked about so many things there, faith, sexuality, drug addiction, really deep stuff. Definitely one of the deepest episodes that we've had to date, for sure. So yeah, obviously next episode will be part 2, the final part of our discussion, where Patrick talks more about how he was able to eventually find healing, and how healing and recovery was a slow process, which he's still on. When it comes to mental health, there's no end destination, there's no paradise. It's an ongoing journey. We are always developing ourselves. We always have things to improve about our mentality and the way we look after ourselves and things like that. So he makes that very clear. Very transparent guy. That's what I love about him. So sharing more about how some turning points in his mental health journey, where now he's been able to help others, through his coaching service. So he talks a bit more about what makes his coaching and what makes it different from therapy, but also just his advice, moving forward. Again, powerful close to our conversation. But before that episode comes, and before I finish this episode, I have a few announcements. Again, if you haven't seen the Mental Roots short animated film, look at the links in the written description for this episode, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on any podcast streaming service. Watch the film so that you can really see the heart behind the visual heart behind why Mental Roots as a brand and as a movement exists. It started with focusing on young black men, and now it's branching out to just focus on mental health in the black community as a whole. And also, even more importantly, I am looking for in fact, let's celebrate, because I finally found someone for editing the visuals. So if you've been listening to the previous episodes, I have been trying to find volunteers to help the podcast keep going. And shout out to Tyler, someone who is also a master's student at the moment in the University of Derby, who has been following this podcast for a short while. So Tyler, shout out to you. Thank you for volunteering right now with the editing. So with the next few visuals that you'll be seeing, if you're watching on YouTube, the next few visuals that you'll see in the episodes will be edited by him. And the visual style that we've already established is all courtesy of my previous intern for video editing, Matt. So Matt, if you're hearing this, thank you again for setting the standard for the visual editing, so that I can just pass the mantle to the next person. And so Tyler, thank you. But we do need someone for social media. This I mean, I'm good with social media. I love using it, but it's like there's still some technical things, like how many hashtags should I use to optimize the views on the post and all of that stuff. So if you're someone who's experienced in that stuff, you would be perfect for this role. I need you. We need you as a team. Jennifer is also working with me. She's been the first volunteer, and yeah, she is also a big mental health advocate. Just finished her masters as well. As of the time I'm recording this, I just got a message from her. She's finished her masters. I forgot what the subject it was in, but it is something that she's using for her mental health practice. So Jennifer, if you're watching or listening to this, congratulations on finishing your masters. Enjoy your break. And yeah, you know, I'm so happy to have her on the team. But yeah, anyway, she manages the emails, mentalrootspod@gmail.com. If you email that email, she will most likely respond because she's the admin for our emails. So if you want to volunteer with not only social media, but anything else you see about this podcast that you feel could be improved, whether it's just editing for our social media clips, whether it is SEO optimization on YouTube, whether it is even turning this podcast into a blog, like whatever your skill set, however you feel you can benefit this podcast, email us at mentalrootspod@gmail.com. Most likely Jennifer will get back to you. Otherwise you can DM us on Instagram at mentalrootspodcast. That's all I wanted to say. As of the time this is releasing, obviously Christmas is nearing. It's like literally, I think, next week. Time is flying. 2021 has flown by so quickly. A lot has happened, but I think we will have one more episode next week before Christmas, and then we'll have a short Christmas break, and then we'll get back to finishing season 2 in January, hopefully, God willing, or February in the latest. And yeah, you know, have a nice Christmas season. Keep yourself safe. Stream Mental Roots, the film. Message us, let us know how you're doing, and we'll be back next week with part 2 of our chat with Patrick. I'm done talking. Stay blessed. Let's go.